gonna just bring my viola out and do a little work up here. No, not doing that. So I am so excited to be here today, and you guys are lucky we're not at church because I would have totally made you move forward. People in the back, you're gonna be sorry. But my job today is to talk to you a little bit about millennials and what we want. But I've found in doing this now for a little while that the first thing we have to acknowledge is actually what many of you non-millennials in the audience want, which I think is often to strangle the millennials that you know. And I can say that because I am a millennial, right? I'm one of these people born between the late 70s and the mid-90s, and I kind of experience millennialness on both a personal level and in environments like this where people sort of need therapy and as a result tell me all their millennial stories all the time. And I thought I'd share one with you just to sort of establish a little common ground and solidarity. So I'm in New York this week and sitting down with a good friend of mine, a former Fortune colleague who's doing some consulting for a very big marketing company. And she had a young employee from there assigned to work with her. So she says, we're meeting, you know, in a coffee shop. I thought I'd be cool and tell him I want to do an off-site meeting. He can bring his laptop, we'll hang out. And she's running a little bit late. So she texts him and says, I'll be there, you know, 10 after 9, because our meeting's at 9 o'clock. She arrives, she's waiting a little more. He arrives at 10:15 to their 9 o'clock meeting. Then, at 11:30, he's starving and wants to take lunch, because he can't think if he hasn't eaten. And perhaps best of all, in all of this, he didn't actually bring his charger for his laptop. So I don't know how much work he could have done anyway, whether he had shown up on time or not. So that is sort of the person that we are dealing with. And that is a real person. And what I'm hoping to accomplish today in the course of talking about sort of what I think of as the 7 secrets to the millennial mindset is really to help you understand that person and then manage that person and eventually make that person succeed. Help him to become his best self, because that is possible. Now, I will say, just as an asterisk, don't be a hero. Not every millennial can be saved, and I think we have to acknowledge that, too. There are bad apples in every bunch, and there are 80 million of us, so surely there's some bad apples in that bunch. But for the most part, if you understand where millennials are coming from, pretty much any challenge can be met with this generation, assuming they're in that big middle group of people who really want to succeed. So what do millennials want? And when I say want, I'm not just talking about on a micro level, flexibility and all the things we're used to. I'm talking about on a macro level. What are we looking for from a philosophy perspective? What do we really desire? Because I think that's where you understanding that actually ends up making a huge difference in helping you to not just cultivate millennials, but really to make your organizations and your cities and your lives as a group dramatically better and poised for real growth in the long term. So want number 1. We want some understanding. Now, it is really rough out there. It is not fun to be a young person coming out of school into the environment that we see right now. The average household with student loan debt right now carries about $26,000 of debt, and that's rising. We, as you all know, generally move back home. Something like 36% of folks between 18 and 31, not 18 and 21, or even 25, 18 and 31 live at home, and 56% of folks between 18 and 24 live at home, according to a Pew analysis of existing data, which basically means that even in college, when you think young people would be going off and learning how to sort of manage themselves in the real world, sans parents, that's not happening. So these folks are really in a different world than we've ever been before. But I think the most important thing to understand is those parents that we're going home to live with are basically crazy, right? And I am talking about many of you in the audience here. So I'm sorry, hashtag not sorry, but it has to be said, right? Another fun story from very recently, I was in DC having lunch at a restaurant, sort of one of these swanky gastropub setups. So there's a woman sitting at the bar, probably I'd say late 40s, and she's got a novel, very contemporary fiction. She's highlighting the heck out of the thing and writing notes in the margins, and I'm thinking, silly me, oh, this is a adult person going back to school, how great. So I give her a few tips as an English major, things to do so you don't actually have to read the whole book, because clearly she was in a rush. And then she says, oh, thank you so much for telling me that, because my son has been away most of the summer. We think it's really important for him to travel. So he's been in Asia and in Central America, and I'm thinking, oh no, what does this have to do with your son, that you're at the bar on a Monday afternoon highlighting a book? And, and then she says, yeah, and he just got back last night, and he's really jet lagged. So even though today's the first day of school, we let him stay home because he's really tired, and I don't know if he would succeed if he went to school today. I'm thinking, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then she says, so I promised him that I would get his homework done for him, which is why I am here, skipping my job, to sit in this restaurant and highlight his book, which he will then go to school and tell his teacher that he read, which is not a great lesson either. And the reality is, that is not just her son's problem, that is her problem, right? We are setting up an environment where parents feel so close to their children and so want them to succeed and recognize that the world out here is so hard that their reaction is, rather than to be active parents and make the hard decisions and say, you want to go to Asia, that's cool, but you also have to read the book, and by the way, if you don't, you have to go to school and face the consequences. Our instinct is to save them from that, as though that's going to do something positive for them in the long term, when intellectually, we all should know that it does exactly the opposite, right? So we are dealing with these crazy people who are raising us, and we understand where they're coming from because, of course, they love us, and they do think that we are special and that we should succeed. But the reality is that's very dangerous. So that's number one. Understand that that's where we're coming from, and that's sort of the foundational space that we're in. And recognize that you are some of those people, right? Some of the most indignant boomer bosses that I meet in offices are also the most indulgent boomer parents. So when you start wanting to strangle the millennial, think, what is my own kid doing to some other person right now? And really answer that question. So that's number one. We want some understanding. Number two, we want insight. Now, you would think that we're in an environment now where there is so much information that millennials wouldn't really need more information than they've got, right? But I think what actually happens is, again, the opposite. We're so inundated by information, and it's so wide and yet so shallow that sometimes we feel like we cannot get enough. If we have to make any decision at all, we've got to Google and YouTube and Yelp and ask all our friends and post a Facebook status and then chronicle all of our path to making a decision on Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr. And by the time we're done with that, we have literally crowdsourced almost our entire lives. And that can be fun in the short term, but as we get older, that's actually not a very positive thing. So when we get these millennials into the workplace, we have to recognize that they actually need structure. They don't think they do a lot of the time, but they do need it. They need direction. Now, I will counsel those of you who are thinking, oh my God, exactly. I'm going to go write a memo of everything this kid needs to do and make him sit at his desk. That is not what I mean. When we're talking about structure for millennials, we're talking about setting great expectations at the front end and making sure that you evaluate the deliverables at the back end. In the middle, let them go do their job. It doesn't help them to hover over them and tell them every single thing that they need to do. You've got to actually just let them know what they have to do, and then when they're done, give them some insight into the things that they have accomplished and what they haven't accomplished. And the amazing thing is that they grow from that. My favorite example of this actually comes from an innovation consultancy called Fahrenheit 212 in Manhattan that I wrote about in the book and profiled for Fortune before that. And they actually do something called 100-day plans. So they get the whole team together, all the youngsters, the oldsters, whoever is in the middle, and they say, let's sit down and talk about the things you accomplished over the last 100 days. Let's make a plan for the next 100 days. And between now and the next 100-day plan meeting, you go meet your goals. And you know what else? By the way, if you come back and you have met your goals, we'll evaluate that together as a team, and your compensation will be linked to how well you met your 100-day plan goals. And for that millennial sitting in that meeting, he's thinking, wow, I know exactly what I've got to do. I know that there's real upside if I do it, and I know that you're here if I need you, but not going to be sweating me every minute of the day and wanting me to sit in front of my desk so that I can actually do this work. So that's sort of want number 2, which is insight. Want number 3, we really want models. And I cannot stress this enough, it does not mean a mentor program. Mentor programs, while wonderful if done thoughtfully, are not, in my experience, generally done thoughtfully. And I think we can all agree about that, right? It's sort of get a database, throw everybody in it, and hope for the best. You both like the Braves, go watch them, right? That's how we think a lot of the time about mentoring, and that's the easy way to do it. But the reality is, for millennials, we want organic connections. We want the ability to really meet people who have expertise, and we respond to expertise. So when it comes to looking for models, we need people around us who actually demonstrate that we can be successful in the company that we're talking about, or in the environment that we're talking about. And we want to see that they're the kind of people we want to be. in the long term. Now, one of my favorite examples of this is actually right in Atlanta, which is UPS. And UPS is interesting because they have folks from all sorts of different backgrounds at their company, and they talk about that. They'll say, you know, this is the part-time loader who just graduated high school, and he was super successful and is now a manager in XYZ division, and they'll talk about that. They'll say, this guy who was CEO of this company, 20 years ago, he was driving a UPS package car, and they'll talk about that, and they talk about it every day. And they talk about the history of their company, and that 100 years ago, any of you who are familiar with UPS will know this, Jim Casey said XYZ, and we're still doing that same thing today. And the amazing thing is, for millennials, it's super empowering, because you're looking up the chain and thinking, that's what I want to be like. I want to be these models. And so when I talk to boomers and Xers who are frustrated by millennials, I'll say what you need to do is be a model yourself. Those indignant boomer bosses need to recognize and bring some of that parenting into the workplace. Gen Xers, who I think can be the most frustrated in the workplace, because they're sort of the big sister or big brother like I was, who comes home after leaving home for the first time, and you look around at your house and you think, oh my gosh, what has happened here? The standards are all gone, mom and dad, you have fallen down on the job. And I think for Xers, that's what's happening in the office, right? They come and they see these young people being accommodated left and right, and they think, wow, I'm not going to have to manage this person who's doing half what I did, half as well, by the way, and my boss is not ever going to leave, so what's going to happen to me when this person takes my job? And companies don't really meet them at that place, and so they don't want to model. They're so frustrated and angry a lot of the time that they don't transition into that organic, positive mentoring space. So we've got to use the people who are already in our companies to model for these young people what it is they can accomplish in our organizations and even in our cities. And I will say that because Wires and Millennials respond so well to expertise, the person that you can almost use to the best advantage are actually those people who are on the way out. And this is a thing that, interestingly, UPS does really well too. People's careers there last 30, 35 years, but they don't just leave. They keep them to facilitate training programs. They have them come and visit and be in the office. They really make them a part of the fabric of the community that exists there. And what ends up happening is you find that millennials really enjoy those stories. They enjoy hearing again what's possible as they grow up at these companies. And the great thing about folks in that traditionalist group who are in their 70s now is that they are really excited to tell their stories. They're not competing with anybody in the office necessarily. And so they're happy to share their wisdom and to help millennials and all employees sort of grow and become successful at their organizations. So that those models become really, really important, and you can do them and demonstrate them in really creative ways, from video to Twitter, to just making sure people are in the office and getting together on a regular basis. I will say, though, that when we think about models, you really have to just make sure that everybody's invested. One of the managers or CEOs rather, that I interviewed for the book, John Jordan, who owns a vineyard out west, said it, I think, best, where he said, I know these people aren't going to stay forever, but I'm putting them in a position to change the trajectory of their lives. And the same way they're investing in your organization, you've got to invest in them that way. And I think they will stay for a long time, because it's not that millennials just don't want to stay in a job. They don't want to stay in the same job, and they don't want to stay working for a person or a company or in a city that doesn't care about them. And if they feel that, they will be excited. Now, want number 4. We want community. Now, again, it's very easy to think millennials are super connected. They have more community than anybody ever had. And I don't know how much you think about this, but if you do, how much community can you have when you are doing this all day? I can't even do this and look at you at the same time standing up here. So imagine teenagers that are in school all day and at home in the evening talking and texting all the time. In fact, I remember reading a Nielsen statistic a year ago or so that the average teen was sending 3,417 texts a month. And I don't know how thoughtful and profound you are all on the text, but my bet is that those are not deep connections that are happening on their cell phones. So you're sending 100 texts a day, and that's your primary communication. What ends up happening is that you're disconnected from people. You don't learn those natural social skills that we think of as human, but for people who are always on their phones or always having their communication mediated by technology, it doesn't feel natural at all. So they need to learn it, and the way they learn it is really by getting together again, in person, IRL, as the kids say, in real life. And I think I realized that this was going to be an issue reading a blog in the New York Times years ago now, where one of the young women that was blogging for them when blogs were sort of a new cool thing, she said, you know, I'm in this in thinking about romantic sort of interactions now that I'm in college and how it happens. And reflecting on my own first middle school relationship, she said, you know, we connected on Instant Messenger with, you know, a boy in my class who I saw every day asked me out on Instant Messenger. And the very first time that we actually had to speak in person without the benefit of emoticons and spell check or whatever else it is, we broke up. So let that be a lesson to you. You need to communicate in real life. And you know, you'll see even now, a site like Match.com, which is all about online dating, is doing live meets. The first time I saw commercials like Match saying, we're going to revolutionize dating by getting you together in person, I thought, well, that's what we've been doing the whole time, right? But that's the lesson, right? Social networks were not invented in the last 15 years. Social networks are human. We know how to connect, but we have to force our kids to do that. We have to force our employees to do that. We have to recognize that it's not natural to them, and the only way for us to sort of help them develop those skills in the longer term is to get them together. And not just formally in settings like this, but informally, the way we would at a mixer or at the water cooler. And if we can schedule that time and get them sort of in front of each other, both in the office and out in the city, then they will build those connections because they want them. They just don't necessarily have those spaces where they can do it naturally right now. So that's want number 4, which is community. Want number 5 is impact. You've all heard millennials want meaning, and everybody scoffs at that. But I don't know if you go around thinking I want unmeaningful work. So I don't know why people are so shocked that we want meaning. But really what it is that we want to be able to find meaning through being able to contribute. And I'll tell you, boomers invented this idea. Before the baby boom generation, work was plow your field, feed your kids, make some money so you can buy your house. It's not really what it is anymore, and I think that's actually a very positive thing. When you think about what millennials are looking for in our work experiences, is that we want you to have a great mission, and then we want to be able to actually affect that mission, so that we can see on a day-to-day basis how we are advancing the company. And that can be as small as I'm stapling these copies and sending out these flyers so that people will come to our event, to something as big as actually making a huge difference in the overall mission that you can measure in any number of ways. But you've got to help them do it. And my favorite example of this actually comes from IBM, which has something called the Corporate Service Corps, sort of modeled on the Peace Corps. And they send multidisciplinary teams off around the world to engagements in places that need them. And they have them tackle a project for 30 days together, so that they're building that leadership, they're building ties with local communities, but they're also learning how to really succeed and seeing on a daily basis, as one of the young people put it to me, that I can make a difference just doing my day job. So impact does not mean we do our regular job every day and then once a year we go and build houses in Africa, right? Unless you are the kind of company that's actually operating in Africa and that is specific and authentic to your mission. What impact means is on a daily basis, I see that I can do good in the work that I'm doing, and I see that my overall organization is interested in impact, that impact is a priority. And you do that by telling us your stories. You do that by showing us how this company has gotten, or this city has gotten you excited about the work that you do. So that's want number 5, which is impact. And want number 6 is success. This is the one that I feel the most passionately about, because everybody wants to be successful. And people assume that millennials don't want success because we don't want the success that others have wanted before us. So when you look at young people, recognize that they do want to succeed, but it means something different for them on a day-to-day basis than it's meant before. One of the young men that I interviewed for my book, he said to me, I know I could have the house and the car and the everything else, but he's like, I think my kids would prefer that I'm there with them rather than I can write them a blank check for the rest of their lives. And I think that's what we all feel. And I know for me, working at Fortune and MTV and some of these big brands, I loved those places. They were and continue to be my family. But there's a day where I looked up and I thought, you know, there's more for me out in the world, and I want to go out and accomplish that. And so it wasn't hard at all to sort of say, these people will still be there for me. I will still be an ambassador and an advocate for everything that they do. But I'm ready now to go be energized and go be empowered and go be free to use this knowledge and use this ability that and these skills that I've built here to go do something even more. And I love it. It's hard sometimes. People always ask me, what organization are you with? And I have to be like, the organization of me. But that's also a way to build character and a way to be successful. And I think the amazing thing is that it's the best people who do that, right? It's the best people in the long term who actually opt out of that stream and go and do the greatest work, and we should help them to do that and make sure that we keep them as ambassadors in our organizations forever, whether they stay or they go or they come back. And secret number 7, which is my favorite, is just authenticity. Everything that I've told you today, you know how to do. You are smart people. But the problem is that we don't do it authentically. We see Twitter pop up and we think, oh, we'll go tweet. You don't need to tweet. Find a millennial to tweet because they'll do it authentically. They'll be able to do it in a way that doesn't seem like the old guy at the club trying to dance with young women, right? And you know what I'm talking about. And that is really what we have to let drive us. And I'll leave you with a thought from one of the, another young man in my book who said, I want to be able to see a transparent sightline from my fundamental values to the work that I do every day. And if you can show us that, if you can make that possible for us every day, you are basically going to be, as we say in the Gen Y, #winning. And that's me. Thank you guys so much.